Let's replay the situation, examining how Christy could have changed her response to Stuart's accusations. Stuart, what happened to my screwdriver? You always take it and you don't return it. Christy, he's blaming me again. I feel like telling him I don't know what happened to his stupid screwdriver, but then we would have an argument that would leave both of us feeling bad. It would be better simply to focus on the problem. Wait a minute, when did you last use it? That would have been the proper response, right? Stuart, distracted from his anger, he thinks about an answer. I haven't used it since last week. They're trying to say questions always distract. Christy, weren't you doing some work around the house last night? Stuart, oh, wait a minute. I guess I did use it last night. Christy, where did you use it? Stuart, I don't know. In the basement. Christy, why don't you look for it there? That would have avoided an argument. As it happened, Stuart found the screwdriver in the basement where he had used it in the night where he has used it the night before. By shifting into questioning rather than counter-attacking, Christie was able to diffuse a potential argument and find a solution to the problem. Blame can be overcome, but if it is allowed to linger, if couples habitually play the blame game, their happiness quotient is inevitably depleted. Every symptomatic problem in marriage, apathy in brackets, irritation, boredom, anger, depression, etc., can be traced to a breakdown in personal responsibility. If you are angry, it is not your husband's fault, but your own choice. If you are depressed, it is not because your wife is failing you, but because you have chosen to be depressed. The habit of blaming your spouse is completely contrary to the principle of taking responsibility for your own action. And there's a little quote here by Virgil, and it says, "They can because they think they can." The subheading called resentment. Let's read that. No one is exempt from being treated unfairly. No one. We can all justify the anger we feel about how a situation or someone, including our spouses, unfairly complicated our existence. But when we hold on to our disappointment, pain, and anger, we only compound our problems. For that is when resentment does its deadly work. Resentment is like a cancer to relationships. At first, small and imperceptible, but over time, growing larger and spreading its poison. Resentment is a cancer of a relationship, spreading like poison through the entire relationship. When you ruminate about an injustice done to you, replaying it over and over again in your mind, it will trigger a flood of negative emotions that feed the hurt all the more. Then comes a succession of confirming incidents to convince you that the object of your resentment is the source of all your unhappiness. When you look for a reason to be unhappy, guess what? You will find many reasons. But guess what happens when you look for reasons to be happy? There may be periods of remission when your mind is occupied with other challenges, but sooner or later, you come back to times of brooding, and the cancer of resentment spreads like wildfire. There is a quote here by Benjamin Tillett, and it says, "God help the man who won't marry until he finds a perfect woman, and God help him still more, and God help him still more when he finds her." Resentment, even if directed to someone other than a spouse, is always detrimental to marriage. Resentment, even if directed to someone other than a spouse, is always detrimental to marriage. We have worked with many couples where one of the partners harbors resentment towards their parents, sometimes even years after their deaths. Janice, our case study for today, 31 and once divorced, came to our office for counseling. We had hardly exchanged introduction when she abruptly poured out one of the most vitriolic words we had ever heard in a long time. "My father is the biggest hypocrite," she exclaimed. "Sure, he gives more money to church than anyone else, but that's only because he has more money than anyone else. At home, though, at home, though, he was the biggest jerk to my mom and me." Janice went on to blame her father for every bad experiences she had ever had, including her stormy 3-year marriage that had ended in divorce. Her resentment towards her father has contributed to the breakdown of her marriage, so she thinks. But instead of seeing her resentment as the problem, she still focused on the blame on her father. Even though her father was supporting her and her baby daughter and paying for her tuition to finish college, she blamed her dad for the mess she was in. We worked with Janice over a few weeks. At one point, Leslie, said, "Janice, I have a feeling that it is easier to blame your father and keep your resentment alive than it is to forgive him. If you forgive him, then the consequences for your actions will shift from him to you, and that is scary." We have a quote here by Bruce Barton, and he says, "If you expect perfection from people, your whole life is a series of disappointments, grumbling, and complaint." Eventually, Janice did make an honest effort to forgive her father. Offering a prayer of forgiveness and taking responsibility for her own actions, she remarried, and although there was no miraculous or instantaneous change, she never went back to blaming her father for her problems. A happy marriage cannot survive the cancer of resentment. Like self-pity and blame, it eats at the human spirit and kills the capacity for joy. But if these toxins are removed, there is no reason a couple can't live happily ever after. Or can they? We have a workbook exercise. How do you experience each other when stressed? This one is very, very important. Marriage was never intended to make you happy. So people not like to hear that one. You make your marriage happy. How? It comes down to how each of you adjust to things beyond your control and manage stress. Because there will be stress.